If you've ever gotten into a strategic conversation, do you lay out a concrete agenda? Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, Step 4. Or do you imagine multiple scenarios?
What if?
Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. Hey, wait a minute. Isn't Disruptive FM an oxymoron? What is so disruptive about frequency modulation in the first place? Well, a lot, actually, if we reimagine its purpose. Disruptive FM was started on the concept of thinking more imaginatively about marketing. What does it mean beyond all the silly buzzwords?
Data, growth hack,
and how do we connect more with
return
people?
on investment.
It's humans, after all, that we're trying to reach until the arrival of our robot overlords. This is Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. Co-hosted by myself, Geoffrey Cologne, a senior marketing communications designer at Microsoft in Seattle, Washington, and Cheryl Metzger, strategy director at Wirestone in Chicago, Illinois. Both of us proud Ogilvy alumni. Don't think of this podcast as us talking at you. Rather, us talking with you. Let's begin the dialogue. It's another episode of the marketing podcast for eccentric minds, Disruptive FM. I'm your co-host, Geoffrey Cologne.
And I'm Cheryl Metzger.
And we are coming to you live from two different parts of the United States. Seattle in the great Pacific Northwest. And Cheryl, you're in Chicago.
I'm in rainy Chicago, not
rainy
in the great
Chicago.
Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, so we've actually swapped
weather.
Weather, that's right. So last week I was in the sunny south of France for Cannes.
That sounds pretty nice right now.
It was pretty awesome. I was there for Cannes Lions, and I learned a lot. I think I saw the future of where things are moving, and it's pretty interesting to see what people are doing at Cannes since it's been going on for 64 years. Can you believe that?
Wow. That's actually, I can believe that because I feel like that's roughly the average age of many of the executives who are attending and who still find it to be like the be all and end all of the creative world.
Yes. And I saw some interesting things. I mean, there was a good mix of tech and creativity and hacking and all these other things that were going on. But I think what I was most fascinated with was something that wasn't even going on at Cannes. It was going on 6,000 miles away in Anaheim, California.
And what was that?
Well, there's this conference called VidCon that has been going on for the last 7 years. I think 7 years. I think it started in 2010. And it is the world's largest gathering of creators. So the interesting thing there, I think, Cheryl, is, you have all these creatives at Cannes, but you have all these creators at VidCon.
I think it's so interesting, the emphasis that you put, because, at Cannes, people wear that title so proudly. Like, I'm a creative. That's the place where that title means so much. But it is interesting that there are other spheres where creator or maker, those are like the badge of honor. That's what people want to call themselves now. And I feel like there's kind of a shift that's happened in the last decade or so where people take a lot of pride calling themselves makers and creators. Whereas creative seems to be really relegated just to the kind of world of advertising, but it doesn't seem to have that currency that creator seems to have out in our culture.
Yes. And I think we're starting to see more and more, like you said, maker or creator or producer is almost becoming very important. Not because systems thinkers and creatives aren't important, but just being able to say, well, I'm a creative. Well, what does that mean anymore? You direct a bunch of people.
Right.
I mean, in the old days, and I say old meaning, only 30 years ago, that was important because you had a vision, but you also knew how things operated, and there was a minimal amount of tools. Yeah. I think now the term creator is important because it could mean a variety of different things in our era. But in the sense of VidCon, I mean, we know that video is still on the cutting edge in terms of where it could be going, Cheryl.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we haven't even gotten to, I think we're still in the experimental phase, which is why I think so many people enjoy going to VidCon. I mean, I actually want to go next year.
Well, and I wonder if they are going to feature Instagram video and Snapchat video and some of those platforms that are really changing the face of video, or is it mostly just independent creators of video?
Yeah, I mean, most of it is independent creators. I mean, they have a lot of people who are YouTube creators and YouTube celebrities that, talk. But of course, these celebrities talk because most of those celebrities, as we know, Cheryl, they're not just celebrities on the camera. They're celebrities behind that camera, or I should say phone, since most of them are using, a phone or tablet to capture what they're doing, which I think a lot of people are interested in because we all live in this world where we have the ability to use tools. We can be on camera. We can be behind the camera. We can do a variety of different things. I mean, in some respects, I think the video creators of now are similar to like what a music video director was in the 80s. They are really testing limits.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. I feel like they're testing limits, but they're also that emphasis on making. I feel like underneath some of that is a desire to produce something that feels tangible and that feels a little bit more authentic, where it's a little bit more connected to the real world. Because I feel like creative and the world of advertising has been very flat. It feels like it is not, it got so enmeshed in digital marketing and digital tactics that I think people really crave making things and that tangibility. So the reason I say that is there's those people who are using some of these new platforms are creating digital content that still feels much more connected to the real world. It's not as produced. It's not as artificial. And so it sort of lives in these between the maker and the creative. And I think that's where creator really owns its own space. And I know we were talking before our podcast about how creators are really experimenting. They still have that curiosity for media, but not in the traditional sense of media, but more in the sense of lots of different medium. And so they're using drone, they're using social platforms, they're recording video, they're, experimenting with stop motion, they're doing animation. There's so many tools, like you said, at their fingertips. So they're sort of taking these tangible tools and creating something that lives in this middle space between the kind of disconnected digital advertising that we've all become used to and that, satisfying craftsmanship of tangibly building something that makers take so much pride in.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're going to see so much more from this community that pushes the needle, that pushes envelopes, that, they're not defined by the restrictions that I think a lot of creatives who work for these commercial agencies are defined by. Meaning a client isn't coming to them and saying, hey, create this and we want it to be a 60-second spot, and then you got to chop that up into 5-second pre-roll for YouTube. Creators are making whatever they want to make. I mean, they're making it mainly for their audience. Brands have really tried to tap into that more, but the interesting thing in having worked with some of these creators is, you know, the brands don't dictate, you know, hey, this is what message we want. No, Cheryl, that it doesn't fly with most of these creators. Right. They would rather give most of these companies the, you know, flip them the bird than have to change how they actually interact with their audience. And that goes back to what you said. They're real. They want to be authentic, mainly because I think most of them fell into this. They didn't say, like, I'm going to become like a YouTube creator. They're just like, hey, I have this idea and I want to make videos. And most of them stumble into it. And then before they know it, they have lots of people that are following them and they want to give them insights and they want to entertain them or they want to feel connected to them. I don't think a lot of people do it for like, hey, I'm going to get fame. I think a lot of them fall into it. I think, you know, when you talk to most of them, they were like, you know, I couldn't get a job as a video editor at a company, so I just sort of did this in my spare time. And before they knew it, they're like, wait a minute, I can just go direct to an audience because I have a platform like YouTube. And I think that's what I think this is going to be interesting as we get rid of more middle people in our society. And what I mean by that is people who make middle transactions, meaning, hey, I have to create something. Who do I go to? I go to a creative. The creative comes up with it. Then they buy the media. Then they place it somewhere. We're getting rid of that model. We are now basically going to a model where it's like, I'm going to create my stuff and I'm going to go direct to people. And all the middle personnel have been removed. You know, Cheryl, if we look at most disruptive technologies, for lack of a better term, most of them remove the middle person. Yeah. Could we be seeing that, you know, with what's happened at Cannes this year, especially with, you know, and to update our listeners, the fact Publicis and WPP have said they don't want to go next year.
Well, you know, I think what's so interesting, though, is just coming back to your point about the middleman. I feel like on the one hand, you could say the middleman might be some of these brand managers, but part of me is wondering whether the middleman is the agency in a lot of cases, because, you know, if you have a savvy brand manager and they connect with a creator, that may be enough to develop the idea and the executions that they actually need. That being said, there's a lot of translation that needs to happen, which is where I think some of those middlemen come in. But it's fascinating to me when you talk about those, like the music video directors from the past, because they were really going into uncharted territory.
That's right.
And when you talk about these creators, they have the freedom that you were just talking about of a real artist. And in both cases, they were going into uncharted territory. They had freedom and they were more artistic than their peers. And I think coming to this Publicis decision, you know, there are a lot of ways that they may fall down and embarrass themselves from making this big investment or pulling out of Cannes. For any listeners who didn't hear the news, Publicis made a big announcement that for the next year, there's a ban on participation in award shows, and they're going to redirect that money that would have been spent as an investment in this development of an artificial intelligence powered assistant for the entire Publicis group. That's going to theoretically help bring together insights much more quickly to help strategists find, ways to help their clients' businesses and get to those insights faster than ever before. You know, a lot of times strategists are digging through research for a long time. So it's supposed to help strategists. It's supposed to help creatives find projects that they're passionate about anywhere in the network and then actually collaborate on those projects. So they're not limited only to the client work that might be in their particular location. And it's also meant to change how people work together. So really, what I took away was that it was an investment in new technology and an investment in both clients and employees. But the new technology point, I think, is what's so relevant here, because my hat is off to Publicis for saying, you know what, we're going to go into unexplored territory for, a massive organization like Publicis. The only way to learn a new technology, to embrace that artistic freedom of experimentation, is to just throw yourself into it and to say, okay, let's try it. Like, we've never tried it before. Let's try it. And that was the spirit that I took away from their decision, was to say, we need to shake things up. We need to think differently. And the best way to do that is to do something radical. And that's what the music video directors are doing. And that's what the creators are doing, is they're saying, why not instead of why? And I feel like that always asking why instead of why not is really a symptom of a larger problem in the creative industry today. And I feel like, coming back to your experience at Cannes, what percentage of people there would you say are more likely to say why versus why not?
Oh, 90%.
Wow.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I was inspired in the environment too. I met a lot of really cool people. I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting people, but there are a lot of things that when you look at some of the awards, you're like, really? That won a gold? It's almost like they just petition to win things that aren't really exciting, but they won. So, yeah. I mean, and it probably is not, when you think of the teams that worked on it, they probably, I don't want to take away from their craft, but I think a lot of them maybe didn't ask like, hey, what is possible with this? I mean, especially when I'm seeing things in 2017 where, the pitch video to Cannes Lions is like, we made a video that went viral. And you're like, really? It's 2017. Like, there was not one award that went to someone who did live video.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and
live
this is
streaming,
what creators
anything.
are working on now. They're like, hey, YouTube has a live stream. Facebook has a live stream. Periscope through Twitter has a live stream. Twitch is a live stream platform. And they're all experimenting there, knowing like, I have to do my edits on the fly. That changes the creative process. And creatives, you know what I think they would say, Cheryl? There's too much of a risk there. My art might get ruined. Your art might get ruined? Give me a break. I mean, that's what they should say is, hey, let's go make some mistakes. Let's get messy. I gotta say, I have to agree with you. I think Publicis doing what they did is, has to be commended only because they're basically saying, let's go get messy and see what maybe we can find.
Let's take a risk in an industry that's risk averse. And, it's funny because it's not just embracing some of these new technologies that I think is taking a risk, but I think another risk that we're kind of seeing, which agencies and marketers should be very, very careful and aware of, is we're starting to see social platforms that are creating or plan to create original content. And I was talking to someone the other day because I think the rise of original content on massively popular platforms like Facebook is a big threat. So I feel like you have a platform like Facebook that owns Instagram, of course. I think a platform like LinkedIn, for instance, actually has a huge potential if they were to create original content. And I don't mean original content like an article. I mean, like a Netflix style video series where people want to tune in and watch the narrative. I mean, I think Facebook getting into original content like that could be something that makes advertising agencies really have to, and also, of course, television stations and, anyone who's creating, content series. It's a new space that they're taking a risk, but they have a built-in audience and they're experimenting all the time. And that experimenting all the time is what's going to find a new sweet spot. And at the very least, it's going to start shifting customer expectations of where they get valuable content, where they go for stories. And I think the more that platforms like Facebook and Netflix and the Amazons of the world create original content, the more brands and advertisers lose that special badge of being the creatives.
Well, yeah, because think of it from this, user experience. If they start to create original content and you start to go to those platforms to watch that original content, there are no ads in that original content. The ads will be served to you based on you liking that content. They will know your behavior. You will see the ads or the things that you might like later when you actually enter the news feed to interact with people. They're not going to put ads into this content. So that changes the creative angle. This means creators actually have to start thinking, hey, what kind of shows would people want to see? Or what would they want? What type of content would they want to actually, engage with? And it's no longer about, a 30-second spot that's carved into a 5-second pre-roll. I mean, this is now about, what are we actually creating that's original that our audience would like, because that becomes the ad. And I think the best people to do that, Cheryl, are people who actually are creators, because they have actually experimented in creating content and can actually go and say, hey, I am a creator. Yeah, I'm a YouTube, personality or influencer or whatever we want to call them. However, I also don't want to be in front of the camera. I want to be behind the camera. So would you hire me to actually create this series? I think we're not that far off from somebody announcing, hey, we've hired a YouTube celebrity to not star in a piece of content, but to direct a piece of content, because we know they are going to give it a whole new angle that I don't think we are seeing from directors that may work on feature films or television shows or other forms of sort of what we would call, watch-only content. Because the thing that creators are going after is, hey, you're watching this, but we also want you to engage with us. They know actually how to have a two-way dialogue, which is really what the internet or the web, that's how it works well. And I think that's where, if you look at Facebook and streaming content on there, you're not going to passively go and just be like, oh, yeah, I'm watching this. No, you're going to star, you're going to heart, you're going to comment, you're going to be doing stuff in real time. Before you know it, they might even create up a user experience where you go into a group setting, so you're watching it with like the 10 people you're connected to on Facebook. So just you and those, 9 other people can comment. I don't think they want to stop at, hey, we just want to put content to stream on. Yeah, that's the first stage. The ultimate stage is we want this to be an engagement platform for people who are connected to other people who know each other, so they can actually watch things together no matter where they are in the world. Because guess what? You can't do that when you watch normal TV unless you and I are on Twitter together talking about it, but we're still with everybody else.
No, I think that's super interesting because, one of the things that's kind of popular now is micro influencers, but they are not talking about micro viewership. And I think that is something that original content on social platforms might see the rise of. And actually, that could be very exciting for creatives, because for all of those creators, I should say creators rather than creatives, for all those creators out there who, may not be able to do this work in their daily job, if you start having a platform like Facebook that needs to create original content series for niche or micro viewerships, then that would employ thousands of creators all the time, seeking to create the right type of content for the various micro viewerships that they're assigned to. So it could be a really interesting way of connecting micro influencers with micro viewerships through a social platform that also allows interaction in a way that people, like you said, typically don't have with the original content series that they follow today. They can talk about it on Twitter, they can talk about it on Facebook, but they're not actually talking about it with the source of the content creators, and the content isn't being shaped back to them specifically. It's really for a much broader audience. So yeah, I think there's a ton of really exciting potential in experimenting on those platforms. And I was also going to say, to give credit where credit's due, I actually know that Ogilvy London specifically looks to recruit artists, musicians, and creators out from the world. They started this new program where they're doing exactly what you're talking about, which is going out into the world and finding the actual creators. Who are the people who are doing beat poetry? Who are the people who are photographers? Who are the people who are making music? Who are the people that are painting? Who are the people that are using social platforms in new and interesting ways to tell stories? They're going out to those people and recruiting them in to revive their creative teams. And I think that that's really necessary because you need people who haven't been beaten down by the requirements of client work, because it's almost the wrong direction. Clients shouldn't be giving too much direction to the creative team when they're not the actual ones who are creators. And the work ends up suffering in the end. So this infusion that you're talking about of creators into the agency world, I think would go very far in keeping them fresh and changing the output, and changing client expectations as well. Because it's really the creators and formerly the creative teams that changed what clients were asked for. It's like, it's not just that we wait for clients to tell us what to do. It's that clients learn from the stuff that they see out in the world, what is going to work for their brand. So it's up to all of us to change what they see and excite them about new ways of, delivering their brand experience in order to do the kind of work that gets people excited to come in every day.
I think it's so exciting. I think it's good. I think it's getting back to where the world needs to move, which is, this intersection of creative people and data science, and you can really create some really interesting things when you have that. I think the one good thing that came out of Cannes that I definitely saw is, for years there was always a discussion on digital, and that still is always happening there. But the pendulum has definitely swung back to the middle, where it's really, hey, this is great, but big data won't solve everything for us. And I think artificial intelligence had its coming out party at Cannes, and there was a lot of discussion on that. But again, we don't know how that will affect the creative industries. We don't know how that will affect a lot of industries. So I think it's an interesting area that obviously you and I can get into in a future podcast in terms of how AI will really change the marketing industry, the advertising industry.
Yeah, and I would say, just as a sort of final word on that, I've seen for those experimenters who are embracing AI, I see the positioning a lot for, or created by humans for humans around the actual technology. And clearly that's their positioning, but I do think that speaks to its potential, that it doesn't have to be in conflict with creatives or just humans in general. It is something that's created by humans, and it is meant to empower humans. So I feel like there's still a lot of possibility there, and I think some of the fear mongering is reasonable, and some of the fear mongering is probably overblown. So I guess time will tell.
Hey, before we depart for this episode, I have to take a short break. Cheryl, I forgot to say that we actually have a sponsor for this show now.
Oh, very exciting.
Yeah. So we'll be back after this short break on takeaways from this episode.
Our digital world is a busy world. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by information. How can we cut through the noise
and communicate?
How do we connect with people
when they're being bombarded with content?
The answer is storytelling.
People love stories.
Stories bring people together.
They build empathy.
Create context.
So we can understand each other and ourselves.
Great stories are both personal and universal.
Emotional and relevant.
They build community and pass on wisdom.
From the dawn of time
To our kids' bedtime.
Around campfires and conference tables, stories celebrate
our shared humanity.
At Microsoft, storytelling can help simplify the complexities of new technology.
To focus on what it means for real people.
Authenticity helps us connect with a story and relate it to our own experiences.
It takes courage.
courage.
To be ruthlessly authentic.
Courage to show life as it is.
Instead of trying too hard to control the message.
By bringing genuine moments to life and exploring relationships between people, we can tell stories that truly inspire.
Stories about perfection are boring.
Real stories, like real lives,
Are filled with ups and downs, with emotion.
Tension keeps us listening. And a story without setbacks
Isn't worth telling.
we should seek out hope.
Frustration.
joy,
And passion.
Using them to deepen the impact of our narratives.
The stories we tell at Microsoft put people right at the center.
and illuminate our mission in action.
They're stories about transformation.
And thriving in a digital age.
Our goal as storytellers
Is to step back and shine a light on our customers' achievements.
Their work, in all its variety,
proves the best way.
To make a connection is to say,
let me
Tell you
Your story.
All right, we're back. And thanks again to our sponsor, Microsoft. Hey, Cheryl, so what are the big takeaways that we should be thinking of on this particular episode? Creatives, is it creatives versus creators, or is it really, hey, creatives, pivot into the creator mode?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think one of the takeaways that I would look for is how do you bring more of those creators into the process? So how do you recruit them into the agency world? How do you get them to actually be the producers and directors of the content so that you can get the artistic, experimental mindset that's so critical in this time when everything is being disrupted, so critical to get people who are still free in their thinking to come in and push your brand and your creative in a new direction. For creatives, in the traditional sense, I think they need to find ways to recapture that curiosity and that boldness. And I know it's really hard when you have a lot of limitations from clients. And, you know, you and I still understand that you have to be practical in some respects, but sometimes clients actually really like when you say no and you push back and you show them that you care so much about doing a great job that you're going to push them in a new direction. So I would say that's one takeaway for creatives, is that to survive, try and capture some of that creator spirit a little bit more. And I think another takeaway is to embrace the unknown a little bit more. So we don't know what's going to happen with AI, but there's so many different forms of AI, as you've mentioned in blog posts before. And there's so many different ways of interacting with it. And there's so many different ways for us to be empowered by it and capture its potential and use it in different ways, that we're just only at the very beginning. And I think if we're truly artists, risk takers, we have to kind of go into the unknown confidently in order to figure out what can really be taken away from there. So those would be some of my takeaways.
Awesome. Well, for another episode of Disruptive FM, I am your co-host, Geoffrey Cologne.
And I'm Cheryl Metzger.
And we'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to an episode of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. Rate and review the show on iTunes. Purchase a copy of Geoffrey's book, Disruptive Marketing, and follow us on Twitter at Disruptive FM. Signing off from the cities of Chicago and Seattle, press pause. Data punks, fine wine aficionados, and social thinkers, Geoffrey Cologne and Cheryl Metzger are your hosts of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds.